Hello, everybody. My name is Puppetine from the Geeky Puppet Show here on the Geeky Puppet Show today. For what? For Sandman. Now, you might be asking yourself, what the hell is this review? That episode came out about 2 months ago. Yes, well, life. Puppet life is hard. It's difficult. But me and Dalton the Authenticator are here to finally get this review done.
To put the Sandman to bed, ching. Because it doesn't look like it's getting a season 2, which means I don't have to worry about them raping my favorite story anymore.
Yay. Wait. They aren't doing a season 2?
No season 2.
Where did you hear this?
At the very least, it has not been announced yet, and even Neil Gaiman is starting to crack. Like, it doesn't seem like we're getting a season 2. So until we get an announcement of season 2, which we would have gotten by now under most normal circumstances, it doesn't look like they're doing a season 2, which means I don't have to worry about them ruining any more of my favorite comics. Which is one of those bittersweet good news, everyone things where, like, I want to say I would like to see a season 2, but given what they did to season 1, I'm like, you can only go so far based on the inertia of how awesome the original was, and they drove it into the ground.
I know we kind of disagree because I enjoyed most of this series. I think a lot of it's really good, but this episode, it came out of almost nowhere. It's 2 little one-off stories, and actually the second part of it is kind of essential to Dream, so you're surprised that this wasn't in the main season.
Yeah, here's the story. The long and the short of it is a large part of the Sandman is not actually explicitly plot-based stuff. A large part of the Sandman is, here is what Dream has been doing for the various centuries, bebopping around history and mythology, having subtle influences here and there. And so several of the volumes of the Sandman are just anthologies, essentially, of individual stories. And this story, or this episode, basically knocks out 2 of the issues within those anthologies, specifically the anthology, which is the 3rd volume, known as Dream Country, which bothers me because that means that if we got a season 2, it would jump right into Season of Mists, because they're probably not going to be able to do Facade, because that story specifically involves a character called Elemento, who is a DC character that they're not going to use. And then there's Midsummer Night's Dream, which they're probably just going to throw in as another one-off episode at some point. Maybe. So they're going to jump right into Season of Mist if they ever do a season 2, which, again, it doesn't seem like they're going to, but so be it.
Well, we'll have to wait and hear about that. But, well, one of the little stories to begin with is actually an animation. Wasn't expecting that, but yes. Starring David Tennant, and starring loosely because he's the one human who actually shows up. The rest are cats, and cats dream of taking over humans. That's it.
The thing that I was waiting for, this didn't happen in the first, in the actual book, because the book was written in the 80s, but what I was kind of waiting for was the twist that they already had taken over the world, and that's why the world obsesses over cats on the internet. Would have been my way of twisting this, but
would have been a funny way to do it, wouldn't it? Because
the whole idea is, dreams can change the world in subtle ways. Well, if cats all dream to take over the world, well, good news for you. You have essentially a slave race that cleans up all your excretions and obsesses over you on any given moment of any given day. But that's neither here nor there.
The book doesn't do that, so I guess
so they didn't. And that's one of the issues I have with it. Not only did they do kind of cheap copies of everything from the books that they adapted, they also didn't really adjust it in any meaningful way. And not that I would advocate for any meddling with the Sandman, but there are some ways that I feel like they could have used hindsight a little bit and been like, well, it's been 30 years, so let's tweak this slightly here or there. But
Well,
no, instead, it's a very simple story about a purebred cat who has a dalliance with a stray cat. Um, her owner finds out that she's pregnant with kittens that aren't purebloods, and the sadistic bastard um gives them the whole bag in a river routine, and we all cringe and hiss and no shout forever screaming to the sky because it is genuinely horrifying. And then said cat goes to the realm of dreams to essentially bargain with the cat of dreams because dream takes the form of whatever looks upon him, and the cat of dreams tells her, if you want this world to be better, then you must dream it, essentially.
yep. And if all the cats dream it, it can be it.
Yep.
And it leaves it with a little tone because it's spreading through to the younger generations, and maybe one day the dream will come. But
And again,
actually,
my paranoid self is looking at that going, given how the world obsesses over cats, it may have already happened.
yeah, but at least we're not being eaten by them. Well, not while we're alive.
Yet, anyway. But that's not here nor there.
But it's the second story where actually most of the action comes into play because we go back to the real world. So the first half of the episode, oh look, it's all animation. It's nice animation.
Yeah, it's short.
And then, dun dun, we get into a real story. So, basically, struggling writer. He goes to an old mentor, who also was a struggling writer at one point, and he says how he got his muse and shows a woman that he captured, Calliope. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, the muse in this case is a very literal goddamn muse.
Literal.
And honestly, I could have sworn they were going to save this for episode 1 of season 2 because it would have been a nice parallel, and they even draw parallels between Dream getting captured by Roderick Burgess in season 1 and Calliope getting captured by Erasmus Fry and then Rick Maddock. The other part of this episode that makes me both laugh hysterically and also facepalm is the what I like to call the lessons that Neil Gaiman should have learned that he apparently knew and then promptly forgot portion of the episode. Because the episode opens with Rick Maddock giving a lecture about the nature of writing. And he gives actual, genuine good advice that Neil Gaiman apparently freaking ignored. And then later on, when Rick has his way with Calliope and becomes a famous writer, thereby doing, he makes a joke about being a feminist writer, which tells me that Neil Gaiman knows that male feminists in particular are slimy fuckwits. And yet, what do you suppose Neil Gaiman calls himself?
Wow, I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference in how, because the character that they're portraying with Arthur Darvill, who from Doctor Who, and so is Rory. His mentor as Yana, Professor Yana, aka the Master.
The elderly master from the David Tennant era.
Yes, I like that. But that aside, I was saying something. Oh yes, I think that I think there's a different thing in that because he was clearly showing that yes, he's claiming to be this feminist writer while holding a woman hostage.
Yeah, while raping a muse
her
from Greek mythology. Yeah. But here's the thing though, and this is yet another case of things that Neil Gaiman should have learned or at least known himself on some level. This entire story is about that stories and ideas come from non-human sources. So you would think then it would follow that since stories and ideas come from non-human sources, you should be grateful and respectful when you have good ideas instead of being an egotistical prat who thinks it all comes from him. And yet Neil Gaiman is an egotistical prat who thinks all of his ideas come from him and not from external sources.
I don't know what you're seeing there, man. I don't see that. I really don't.
It's been a running theme throughout the show. Like in the Shakespeare scene of the Hobgaddling episode,
Yeah, which we
he
both
walks up
enjoyed. We both like that.
he walks up to Shakespeare, and Shakespeare goes, "Have we met?" And Dream says, "Yes, but men forget in waking hours."
Yeah.
And I have the same reaction here as I did when I read it originally in the first place, after having read the ending, which is terrible, of the Sandman. But I had this reaction of like, if I wrote that, if I were a writer and I wrote that, my brain would immediately go, now wait a minute. If this is how this works, then have I been visited by someone without realizing it? That would be the
Well,
way. That would be where my brain would click. But
I
apparently, it never occurred to Neil that any of the rules that he lays out here should ever apply to him,
I
and it
think
bothers me.
I think we're getting different messages from this story, because this story to me is about the how desperate the author becomes, and how he is making right his terrible like his behavior. He is rationalizing it. Oh, I am doing this for the good. Just give me the story. I won't do this. But she can't just do that. She says, free me, and I will. But he's abusing her.
Yeah,
And this is the whole
he's
thing.
paranoid and won't let her. He won't let her go. But my point is, I think Neil Gaiman has good instincts, but he never actually follows through on those good instincts, which is why he can take good ideas that he has or had once upon a time and crap all over them with no self-awareness.
I
And it
I
bothers
don't
me.
see it as crapping all over it. This was legitimately good, and in the end, when when he gets his justice, as it
Yeah,
were.
okay. Yeah, let's go back to describing because we're getting
Yeah.
lost in the weeds here a lot.
Well,
So,
no, because it's been weeks. Anybody who's coming here has probably already seen it.
I mean,
The
yeah, but
end of
let's,
it.
for the sake of the people who haven't seen it yet,
Like
so yeah, Rick gets the muse Calliope, she of Homer's inspiration from Erasmus Fry. He takes her home and he tries to bargain with her of like, I really need a good story. I have a I have a stipend
Calliope,
from my
I come
publisher.
to bargain.
Yeah. She I have a stipend from my publisher. They're gonna take the advance back if I don't hand in some rough draft by the time of like next week or whenever it is. And she's like, I've been enslaved to Erasmus, to the other guy, for 70 years. All I ask of you is to let me go. Don't try to bribe me, don't try to romance me. I just want my freedom. And then after I have my freedom, then if you pray to me like they did in the old days when it was still ancient Greece, then I might have something for you. But instead of this, he decides to force himself upon her because if the muse won't be willing to help him, then
You
he'll
must
just rape
hate
her
it.
and it'll be fine.
It'll be fine. I don't think that, but no,
Well,
he does make this transformation. More and more, he sees his actions as, well, this is right. I can't let you go. I'm having a successful career.
yeah,
Um,
and in the comic, the rationalization starts with she's not a human being, she's a goddess, and
a lot of that is in here too.
yeah, they're supposed to serve writers, they're supposed to serve creatives, and therefore, which again would have been nice if you had internalized this message a little bit, Neil, but never the fuck mind. Um, but nevertheless, she prays to the 3-in-1, to the Fates, to Hecate, and they show up and they're like, well, we can't really do anything for you because the guy who originally bound you did so according to the Eleusinian mysteries, which is how gods like yourself get bound lawfully. So you're screwed. But if you're willing to beg, maybe your ex-lover Oniros, aka Dream, would be willing to come and get you out.
Your
Unfortunately,
dreamy lover.
unfortunately, as it happens, he is also interred beneath the ground. So, oops.
But
But
then he
eventually,
gets out.
eventually she gets desperate enough to actually ask Dream for help. Which at first she's like, "No, we're exes for a reason. he despises me for leaving him, and I despise him for what he did to our son. So yeah. But
Yeah.
she eventually gets desperate enough, and luckily for her, this is after Dream got out, so she summons him, or actually gets Rick Maddock to summon him on her behalf, um, which I thought was a nice touch. I don't believe that's how it happened
The issue.
in the actual issue, but that was one aspect of like I was okay with that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Dream comes running because of course Dream has been in timeout for the last 70 years, and he's like, oh well, I was a bit of a dick though, right? Well, I better fix that. And so he tries to reason with Rick Maddock on Calliope's behalf, and Rick Maddock's response is, I can't let her go, I need the ideas. To which Dream's response is, well,
You'll have ideas.
if ideas you want, ideals you shall have in
Yep.
abundance.
And
And
he
so
just can't.
abundant are these ideas that it literally drives him in freaking sane.
Yeah, I do like that. But then at the end, at the end of it all, his hands are all bloody. He's smearing the walls, and
Yeah, because he can't write down his ideas fast enough. He can't type them up fast enough. So he literally starts using his own blood and skin to write his ideas on because they keep coming so quickly.
yeah,
Yeah, and he
and
gets
ultimately
condemned to the
Calliope
madhouse.
gets let
As
go, and well, I think he's seen his punishment.
yeah,
Um,
the really sad part though is when Calliope gets out, she convinces Dream to free him, and then when Dream frees him, he has no inspiration left. Like, not only does he not have any inspiration left, he essentially has anti-inspiration to the point that he literally starts forgetting the entire fiasco. Like, not only does he not remember where his ideas come from or having any new ones, but he actually forgets how he got inspiration in the first place.
it's fitting, honestly, because he became a monster, as it were.
Yeah, and I
Well,
mean, as per usual, I don't think the execution lived up to how well it was done in the comic. Um, there there
I
are
still
some
think it's very good, though. This was my
there are
first. Yeah,
there are some lines of dialogue that are missing where when Dream comes to him and starts trying to talk him out of it, there are some lines of dialogue that are missing that make Dream seem without them makes Dream seem more petty than he otherwise would. Um, and again, I'm finding that to be a consistent pattern here where they take out parts that would make Dream seem more epic and they leave in parts that kind of make him seem dumb, and I'm not okay with that.
yeah.
So
I didn't see
while I
it.
appreciate this episode in that they didn't completely ruin two of my favorite stories, and I'll say that for this, Calliope is one of my favorite stories in the entire run, and I'm glad they didn't completely ruin it. But again, there are some failures of execution that are at this point baked in because they can't really go back to episode one and fix everything they did wrong to begin with. Um, so yeah,
I don't
I
know.
get
I think it was. They were two very interesting stories. I'm not a big fan of the cat one because I don't know.
yeah,
It
I
didn't bite
never
me.
understood the appeal of Dream of a Thousand Cats. A lot of people really like Dream of a Thousand Cats,
A lot of
and
people like cats.
well, I'm a cat person too. I mean, I've spent the last month and a half grieving over my cat because my cat is missing. But that's neither
Oh,
here
I'm
nor there.
sorry.
But it never it of all the great one-off stories, and there are some really awesome one-off stories in the Sandman, and they're some of my favorite stories. Dream of the Thousand Cats is one I usually end up skipping, but Calliope is right up there with Men of Good Fortune, Hobgadling's story, with
Yeah.
one of my favorites of the show,
Yep.
or one of my
And
favorites of the comics. So I'm glad they didn't completely ruin it, but at the same time, it left me with the same kind of Neil, take your own advice thing that I got from the comic as well after having read the ending.
well, at least you feel that way about both the comic and the
Yeah,
show.
yeah, it's one of those
Um,
Neil. Take the smart things your characters are saying and apply them to yourself, please.
I think it's just a matter of what Neil may believe, but I mean, we don't know. But overall, I think these are two very interesting stories, to say the least. I think
It's
they're
a much better way of ending it off than the last episode was, but at the same time,
in the way the last episode ended, it was supposed to be, boom, this is the season finale.
Yeah,
Get ready for the next one.
Season finale.
And then
I do kind of wish they had used Calliope as the first episode of season 2, but seeing as we're not getting a season 2, it seems,
perhaps
I'm grateful that I at least got to see it, but at the same time, I'm left with this notion of I want this to continue because it's still Sandman, but at the other side, I'm like, I don't want this to continue because I don't want them to half-ass Sandman anymore. Because that's the ultimate thing with Sandman, is even a half-assed version of Sandman is going to be good because the original was so freaking good. But at the same time, if you know the original, if you know how good it can be, you find yourself really disappointed with, some of the good stuff is still there, like the bare bones of the good stuff is still there because the original was so good that you couldn't not have some of the original quality, but at the same time, it's so diluted that there's like 1 part per million of actual Sandmanness in here.
I just think it's better than She-Hulk.
Getting literally kicked in the balls would be better than most of She-Hulk.
Yes, that's true.
That is not a high bar. That is a bar that is baked into the bedrock of the universe.
Every time that that I talk to somebody about a show, and I legitimately feel this way, and I'll say it's better than She-Hulk. That's going to be the new bar, because that show only has one good episode worth watching, and the season finale, I have my doubts, but we're going to have to wait and see.
The only episode worth watching of She-Hulk wasn't even primarily about She-Hulk.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see if there will be a season 2 of Sandman. If so, we'll be covering it here.
Yeah, I will be back once more, waking people from the nightmare, but
to authenticate it.
Yes, but that's neither here nor there. And until then, or when Neil Gaiman gets another adaptation together, hopefully better this time, then we'll be back. But until then, cheers, guys. See you later.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and, check out the rest of the channel. See ya real soon. Goodbye. Oh, shit!
Cheers, guys.
I'm stuck.